The breaking point. The first ships appeared on a Tuesday morning, hanging in Earth's sky like black teardrops against the blue. Marcus Chen was drinking coffee on his apartment balcony in New Singapore when the emergency broadcasts began. The Tau ships were massive, each one the size of a city, and they moved with purpose that made his engineer's mind race with questions about their propulsion systems. "This is not a drill," the announcer's voice cracked through every device on the planet. "We are receiving communication from the vessels. They claim to come in peace." Marcus watched through his telescope as smaller craft detached from the motherships, descending toward major population centers. The Kethmori, as they called themselves, were tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms, their faces bearing an unsettling resemblance to humans, if humans had been stretched and refined by some cosmic sculptor. They spoke perfect English. Perfect Mandarin, perfect everything. They had been watching Earth, they said, learning from humanity's broadcasts for decades. "We come as traders," their spokesman announced to the United Nations. "Your species shows promise. We offer technology, medical advances, clean energy, in exchange for cultural knowledge and a small workforce to help us understand human nature better." The world celebrated. Marcus felt uneasy. His unease proved justified 3 months later when the volunteering programs became mandatory quotas. The Kethmori needed workers for their vast mining operations across the galaxy, they explained. Just temporary assignments. Families would be reunited soon. The lucky selected humans would see wonders beyond imagination. Marcus was among the first wave, selected for his engineering expertise. The transport ships were clean and efficient, filled with humans from every continent. Elena Vasquez, a former Army medic from Mexico, sat across from him during the journey. Her dark eyes held the same suspicion that gnawed at his gut. "Something's wrong," she whispered during their 3rd day in space. "I've been watching the crew. They don't look at us like equals. They look at us like inventory." The ship dropped out of hyperspace near a red dwarf star. Below them stretched Xerion Prime, a world of endless quarries and processing plants. The beautiful cities they had been promised were nowhere to be seen. Instead, prefabricated housing blocks stretched to the horizon, connected by tubes and walkways. The air tasted of metal and desperation. "Welcome to your new home," Overseer Zalthak announced as they were herded into processing centers. His translator rendered his words in perfect English, but there was something cold in his 4-eyed gaze. "You will work. You will produce. You will be grateful for the opportunity to serve a greater purpose." The work was backbreaking, 12-hour shifts in the mines, extracting rare minerals that powered Kethmori technology. The aliens had studied human physiology well. They knew exactly how far they could push before permanent damage occurred. The food was nutritionally complete but tasteless. The sleeping quarters were cramped but sanitary. Everything designed for maximum efficiency with minimum care. Marcus threw himself into the work, but his mind never stopped analyzing. The Kethmori were masters of technology, but their approach was rigid, formulaic. They had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy using the same methods: study, deceive, enslave, exploit. It had worked perfectly for millennia. Elena worked, in the medical bay, treating injuries and illnesses that the Kethmori deemed worth fixing. She began to notice patterns. Humans adapted faster than expected. Their injury recovery rates exceeded Kethmori projections. More troubling, some humans were developing resistance to the neural dampeners used to suppress aggression and rebellion. "There's something they don't know about us," she told Marcus during their brief rest period in week 6. Something they missed in all their studying. The discovery came by accident. Marcus was repairing a ventilation system in the deepest part of the mine when his tools broke through into a hidden chamber. The room was small, carved from solid rock and empty except for a single pedestal holding what looked like a crystalline sphere the size of a basketball. The moment Marcus touched, the world changed. Images flooded his mind. Not memories, but knowledge. Genetic code unfolding like a flower. Evolutionary pathways that humanity had never traveled. Potential locked away in junk DNA, waiting for the right trigger. The sphere wasn't alien technology. It was human, left behind by an earlier version of their species that had reached for the stars millions of years ago. We are not the first, the sphere whispered directly into his consciousness. We are the return, the children who forgot they were once gods. Marcus staggered back, his mind reeling. The knowledge burned in his brain like fire. Humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were the descendants of an ancient race that had once ruled the galaxy before choosing to forget, to start over, to experience the joy of discovery anew. The potential was still there, dormant in every human cell, waiting for sufficient pressure to activate. He found Elena that night pulling her aside from the other exhausted workers. Her eyes widened as he explained what he had discovered, showing her the sphere he had hidden in their quarters. It's not just history, he whispered urgently. It's instruction, a manual for what we really are. The Kethmori study species to find their breaking point, but they don't understand that humans don't break. We evolve. Elena touched the sphere tentatively. Her gasp was sharp as the knowledge hit her, but unlike Marcus, who had been overwhelmed, she seemed to absorb it naturally. Her breathing slowed, her posture straightened, and when she opened her eyes, they held a light that hadn't been there before. How many others? She asked. I don't know. But if we can awaken enough of them. They started small. A touch here, a whispered conversation there. The sphere seemed to amplify when more humans came into contact with it. Dr. Sarah Kim, a geneticist from Seoul, was next. Then Victor Petrov, a mining foreman who had been organizing quiet resistance. Each awakening made the next easier. The changes were subtle at first. Improved coordination, faster healing, enhanced problem-solving abilities. The Kethmori noticed productivity increases and congratulated themselves on their efficient management. They never suspected that their slaves were becoming something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Marcus felt the change in himself most acutely during his shifts. His hands moved with impossible precision. He could see structural weaknesses in the mining equipment that he had never noticed before. His mind processed engineering problems at speeds that should have been impossible. But more than that, he felt connected to the other awakened humans in ways that transcended normal communication. Elena's medical knowledge expanded exponentially. She began to understand not just human physiology, but the biological systems of the Kethmori themselves. Their weaknesses, their fears, their complete inability to comprehend what they had unleashed. The first test came in month 4. Overseer Zalthak decided to make an example of a human who had been caught stealing food for sick workers. The punishment was public execution, designed to remind the others of their place. Marcus felt the rage building in the awakened humans around him. But it wasn't the wild, undirected anger that the neural dampeners were designed to suppress. This was focused, intelligent, and utterly implacable. As Zalthak raised his weapon, every piece of machinery in the compound began to malfunction simultaneously. Lights flickered, gravity generators stuttered, communication systems shrieked with feedback. In the chaos, Marcus moved with inhuman speed, disarming the overseer and delivering a blow that should have been impossible for a human to survive delivering. Zalthak crumpled. The other Kethmori guards raised their weapons, but they found themselves facing not cowering slaves, but something far older and infinitely more dangerous. You studied us, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the compound despite speaking normally. You thought you understood what we were, but you only saw what we chose to become. You never saw what we chose to forget. The revolt began that night, not with violence, though the awakened humans were more than capable of it, but with something far more terrifying to a species that prided itself on technological superiority. The humans began to understand and improve upon Kethmori technology, faster than their creators ever had. Within days, the communication arrays were turned into beacons, sending signals to every human colony in the galaxy. The message was simple and impossible to suppress. Remember who you are. Elena coordinated the medical response as more humans awakened. The process was becoming faster, spreading through populations like a beneficial virus. Each awakened human could trigger the awakening in others simply through proximity and intent. Dr. Kim made the most crucial discovery. The awakening wasn't just unlocking dormant potential, it was networking human consciousness on a quantum level. Every awakened human was connected to every other, sharing knowledge, skills, and insights across impossible distances. "We're not becoming superhuman," she explained to the growing circle of leaders. "We're becoming what we always were, a collective intelligence that chose to fragment itself to experience individual growth. The Kethamori didn't capture slaves. They triggered our reunion." By the end of month 5, Zerion Prime was no longer a prison. It was humanity's first reclaimed world. The Kethamori who survived the initial awakening found themselves prisoners of beings they had thought they understood. Marcus stood in the former overseer's office, looking out at humans who moved with purpose and precision that made their former captors seem clumsy and crude. Ships were being built in the orbital yards, but these weren't just improvements on Kethamori designs. They were expressions of technology that predated the rise of galactic civilization. "They're sending fleets," Elena reported, her consciousness touched by awakened humans on a dozen other worlds. "The Kethamori High Command considers us an existential threat." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since awakening, he felt the full weight of humanity's true nature settling into his consciousness. "They're right to be afraid. They thought we were broken. They have no idea what they've actually done." The first phase was complete. Humanity was no longer scattered and enslaved. The children were remembering what their parents had chosen to forget. And across the galaxy, an empire built on the oppression of lesser species was about to discover that they had never been the apex predators they believed themselves to be. The storm was gathering, and it wore a human face. The rising storm, the Kethamori High Command emergency session took place in the crystalline towers of their homeworld, Kethithis. High Executor Vexandra, eldest of their species, gazed at the holographic displays showing red alerts from across their empire. 17 worlds in rebellion, 34 colonies gone dark, and at the center of it all, the impossible reports of human enhancement. "Impossible," she hissed through her translator, her forearms gesturing dismissively. "Humans are Category 7 primitive. No species has ever advanced more than 2 categories in less than a millennium." "The data streams don't lie, High Executor," her intelligence coordinator reported nervously. "They're not just using our technology better than we can. They're creating entirely new applications. The ships emerging from their controlled territories. Our analysts can't even understand how they're achieving faster-than-light travel without our hyperdrive matrices." On Zerion Prime, Marcus stood in the command center that had once housed Kethamori overseers. The awakened humans around him moved, with a coordination that transcended normal teamwork. They weren't just working together, they were thinking together, each mind contributing to a collective intelligence that grew stronger with every new awakening. "Status report," he said, though he already knew the answers through the quantum network linking all awakened humans. Commander Yuki Tanaka, formerly a cargo pilot from Earth, had awakened 3 weeks ago and immediately understood spacecraft systems at a level that made Kethamori engineers look like children playing with toys. "The fleet is ready, Marcus. 73 vessels, each one incorporating improvements our ancestors would have recognized. We're not just matching their technology anymore. We're remembering how to surpass it." Elena appeared beside him, her consciousness touching his through the network. She had been coordinating with awakened humans across the galaxy, and the news was extraordinary. "It's happening faster than we projected. The awakening is becoming exponential. Every human who remembers can awaken dozens more within days. The Kethamori can't contain it anymore." Dr. Sarah Kim materialized as a hologram from the research station they had established in orbit. Her team had been working around the clock to understand the full implications of humanity's genetic heritage. "Marcus, you need to see this. We've decoded more of the ancient data. Our ancestors didn't just rule the galaxy. They created most of the species currently inhabiting it, including the Kethmori. The revelation sent ripples through the collective consciousness. Marcus felt the shock and understanding wash through thousands of awakened humans simultaneously. Explain. The genetic markers are undeniable. The Kethmori, the Zeltec Empire, the Harmony Worlds, the Void Stalkers. They're all evolutionary, products of human genetic engineering from millions of years ago. Our ancestors didn't conquer the galaxy. They seeded it with life, then withdrew to let their children develop independently. Elena's voice carried a note of wonder and horror. They're not our conquerors. They're our children, and they never knew their parents were still alive. On Keththis, Vexandra felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The reports were becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. Human fleets had appeared in the outer systems, not attacking but simply waiting. Their ships were beautiful in ways that hurt to look at. Graceful curves and impossible geometries that suggested technologies her species had never dreamed of. High Executor, her communications officer, announced, "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's in the old tongue, the original language from the archives." The message played through the council chamber in words that preceded the rise of Kethmori civilization. But somehow, impossibly, every being present understood it perfectly. Children of the void, children of the distant stars. We have returned not as conquerors, but as the parents you never knew you had. Your empire was built on the enslavement of others, on the belief that strength gives you the right to dominate. This was not the path we hoped you would choose. But it is not too late to change. Marcus's voice continued from across the galaxy, carrying the weight of millions of years of genetic memory. We offer you the same choice we offered ourselves long ago: growth through cooperation or stagnation through domination. Choose wisely. We will not ask again. The transmission ended, leaving the Kethmori High Command in stunned silence. Vexandra's mind raced through the implications. If the humans were telling the truth, if they truly were the progenitor species, then every foundation of Kethmori civilization was built on a lie. Impossible, she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. Viktor Petrov had awakened on the mining world of Drakmor, and within days had organized the most effective rebellion in galactic history. Unlike the chaotic uprisings the Kethmori were used to suppressing, this was surgical, precise, and absolutely unstoppable. The awakened humans didn't just overcome their guards, they converted them. The process was startling in its simplicity. When an awakened human touched a Kethmori, genetic memories activated. The alien suddenly remembered their true history, their actual origins, and the loving care with which their ancient human creators had guided their early evolution. It's not brainwashing, Victor explained to the growing council of human leaders. It's remembering. They've been living a lie for so long that they forgot the truth was buried in their own DNA. The converted Kethmori were horrified at what their empire had become. They had been created as gardeners meant to tend and nurture life throughout the galaxy. Instead, they had become its greatest threat. Many chose to commit ritual suicide rather than face the weight of their crimes. Others begged for the chance to make amends. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Human awakening led to remembrance. Remembrance led to understanding. Understanding led to the collapse of an empire built on fundamental misconceptions about the nature of power and civilization. But not all Kethmori accepted the truth. Vexandra gathered the military hardliners around her, those who preferred comfortable lies to difficult truths. Even if the humans speak truth about the past, she declared, they are few and we are many. Their ancient power has been dormant for millennia. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. That must count for something. The final battle came, not as a war between species, but as a confrontation between two different visions of what civilization could be. The Kethmori fleet that gathered at the edge of human space was massive, containing every warship the Empire could muster. Millions of vessels, weapons that could crack planets, technology refined through countless conquests. Against them came humanity's answer. Not a fleet, but a single ship. It was impossible to look at directly. The vessel existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its structure incorporating principles of reality manipulation that made conventional physics seem quaint. Marcus stood on its bridge, but he was simultaneously present on every awakened, human world. His consciousness distributed across the growing network that now encompassed millions of minds. One last chance, he broadcast to the Kethmori fleet. Remember who you were meant to be. Remember why you were created. Choose growth over stagnation. Choose cooperation over domination. Vexandra's response came as a wave of weapons fire that could have sterilized 100 worlds. The energy beam struck the human ship and simply stopped. Not absorbed, not deflected, but recognized and gently redirected. The impossible vessel moved through the Kethmori fleet like a dancer, its passage triggering cascading system failures throughout the enemy formation. But it wasn't destruction. It was transformation. Each ship that the human vessel touched began, broadcasting the same signal that had started humanity's awakening. The Kethmori crews found themselves remembering their true purpose, their actual heritage, the love that had guided their creation. Within hours, the great fleet of conquest had become a fleet of gardeners, eager to return to the work they had been created for. Vexandra's flagship was the last to fall. As the awakening reached her bridge, she felt the weight of 10,000 years of mistakes crushing down on her consciousness. She looked at Marcus through the view screen and saw not an enemy but a disappointed parent. "We failed you," she whispered. "You learned," Marcus replied gently. "That's all any parent can ask of their children. The question now is what you'll do with that knowledge." The transformation of galactic civilization took less than a year. Species that had been enslaved for millennia found themselves free. Worlds that had been strip-mined were restored. Technologies of creation replaced technologies of destruction. Elena stood with Marcus on the observation deck of New Earth Station, looking out at a galaxy in the midst of its greatest renaissance in millions of years. Fleets of ships moved between stars not as conquerors but as gardeners, helping young civilizations find their own paths to growth. "Was this what our ancestors intended?" she asked. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast network of human consciousness humming with contentment across the galaxy. "I think they intended for us to have the freedom to choose. They chose to forget their power so that their children could discover their own. We chose to remember so that our children could grow beyond what we ever imagined." Dr. Kim's voice reached them through the network. "The final census is complete. Over 60 species have requested awakening protocols. They want to remember their own origins, their own potential. The galaxy is choosing to grow up." Commander Tanaka added her report from the edge of known space. "Long-range sensors are detecting signals from beyond the galactic rim. Other galaxies, other gardens our ancestors planted. We're not the only ones remembering who we are." Victor's presence touched their consciousness from the restored mining worlds, now transformed into centers of learning and art. The Kethmori have asked to change their name back to the original. They want to be called the Nurturers again. Marcus felt the vast contentment of a galaxy healing, species remembering their purpose, children finally understanding the love that had shaped their existence. The Kethmori had thought humanity was broken, suitable only for slavery and exploitation. They had been wrong in the most beautiful way possible. Humanity hadn't been broken. They had been sleeping, dreaming of what they might become when they chose to remember what they had always been. And in awakening, they had given their children the same gift their ancestors had given them, the freedom to choose their own path to greatness. The empire built on domination was gone, replaced by a community built on growth, discovery, and love. The slaves had indeed become their master's extinction, but extinction had never been about death. It had been about transformation, about growing beyond the limitations of fear and conquest into something worthy of the stars themselves. The galaxy was young again, and its children were finally ready to come home.